Hello and welcome to the Bearded Nerd Podcast. And today we're diving into one of the most critical elements of any great tabletop role-playing game, which are the NPCs. These characters are the lifeblood of your world. They add depth, drama, and delight to any campaign. NPCs are more than just shopkeepers or quest givers. They can be allies, rivals, or wildcards that shape your story in unexpected ways. But crafting an NPC that truly sticks with your players, well, that's an art. So that is exactly what we'll be exploring today. By the end of this episode, you'll have actionable tips to create NPCs that feel real, impactful, and unforgettable. Whether you're crafting a charismatic villain or a quirky innkeeper, I've got you covered. So, if you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe and check out our Patreon services for exclusive resources, including an NPC creation toolkit to help you design memorable characters for your games. With that being said, let's dive into this episode. Every NPC should serve a purpose in your campaign. Ask yourself, why does this character matter? Are they there to aid the players, provide opposition, or add flavor to the world? For example, an ally NPC could be a grizzled mercenary who offers tactical advice and occasional backup in combat. A rival could be someone who's maybe a competing adventurer who races the players to claim an artifact or forcing them to make moral and tactical decisions. Maybe they're not necessarily an enemy, but they're a rival, very much like your typical shonen anime, that you have the rival there that is really inspiring the main character. And I automatically think of the anime My Hero Academia, where you have Deku, the main character, and Deku's rival, Bakugo. Bakugo isn't necessarily the villain. Yes, he bullies Deku in the beginning, and they become stoic friends towards the end of the show and the manga. However, he's still a rival. He competes. He's an NPC, so to speak, that provides some sort of contradiction to the main character. And in the same example, in the same light, you can have a rival NPC that provides some sort of opposition to their being and to their moral or ethical compass. The third example of an NPC is the villain. Very typical, very self-explanatory. They are the enemy of the party. This could be a manipulative noble, it could be a god, it could be pretty much anything that threatens the party and their allies. Lastly, the wild card. The wild card is a favorite of mine because it's something that you don't know where they're going, what the next steps are going to be for this NPC. They're pretty neutral. A great example could be like a bard who seems to appear, just in the moment. They could appear to be morally or ethically right. And in a moment, with certain maybe hints that you give the players, it can enhance the story, but more importantly, it could be a different character that changes midway. So that way it throws the players off. Not saying that throwing the players off is more or is better than enhancing the narrative or the story, but it's one of those moments where the player at face value gets the classic slap in the face, so to speak, right? It's the, whoa, I didn't think that this character was going to do that moment. And in those moments, you have the NPCs that are memorable. And part of being a memorable NPC is often coming down to the small details, right? It's often about the small details. What makes this character stand out? It could be a speech pattern, a behavior. It could be an appearance that they kind of maintain. If it's a speech pattern or a behavior, you can obviously correlate that with a particular flavor, with a particular style. What do I mean by that? For example, a behavior. you can correlate maybe an eccentric NPC with a savant. You can correlate a particular speech pattern with something that is metaphorical, right? Maybe they use quite literally metaphors in their speech. But there's a lot to it. A memorable NPC is something that just stands out. So, like I mentioned earlier, consider creating and writing, or having rather, a speech pattern for that NPC. Maybe it's like a pirate captain who peppers their dialogue with sea metaphors, like I mentioned earlier. From a behavioral perspective, maybe it's that eccentric wizard who is a savant in magic and in the arcane, and therefore writes spells on pieces of paper, napkins, so to speak, maybe even like on a piece of bread, where they use this like crazy quill that can almost solder or burn in the scroll spell in a piece of bread. And before they, quote, eat the spell, it's how they memorize magic by quite literally consuming it, right? That's a weird NPC, but that'll make you remember it for sure. I bet you right now, after this episode, you'll write that NPC idea right now. Another way, of course, to make a PC or an NPC memorable, is through their appearance, right? Maybe the merchant has a prosthetic arm in the shape of a dragon's claw. Why would they have that? Did the dragon bite off their arm? Did they lose it and they just thought it was cool? How or why did they do this? Again, things that are making the NPCs memorable. So when you do that, when you have that kind of laid out, again, I've always mentioned it, laying out the foundation, make a script for yourself. Write something down to introduce the character. Introduce them and let it be with some impact, right? That first impression of an NPC sets the tone. Make it count. Very similar to in the real world, where they say first impressions are a big deal and they matter so much. Make this first impression count and let it be a moment where the players step back and enjoy it, right? Make it count by tying their introduction to their role or their personality. For example, let's say you have a stoic knight that enters into a crowded hall. Their armor's polished to a mirror shine, but they refuse to remove their helmet. Yes, very Mandalorian-like, but that reflects who they are. They're stoic. They live by their creed. They keep everything prim and proper because that's perhaps what their creed tells them to do. Their oath, maybe they're a paladin, and their oath is maybe not related to cleaning and polishing armor, but they made an oath to be morally pure. So therefore everything must be clean. Their soul must be clean from sin. Their body must be clean from bad food, or from the presence of not being healthy and fit for service. Their armor must be clean and pristine, right? These are things that could reflect the NPC. And on the same note, you can have a frantic scholar that is covered in soot, waving scrolls and shouting and yelling and doing all these crazy things. And it's, you can have them erratic, right? Maybe they are an erratic person. So when they come into the party or to talk to the party for a quest, right? They're going to give out a quest, so to speak, and they are an erratic mess. Maybe they are erratic themselves. So it gives the party something to think about. Now, one thing that I really want to emphasize is that memorable NPCs aren't just quirks. They are more than their quirks. They need to feel real because every NPC, for whatever reason, will have a goal, a flaw, or a secret that motivates their actions, just like any of the characters and any of the objects in your world. A blacksmith may dream of forging a weapon that can slay a dragon, but they lack rare materials, so they'll send the party for those rare materials. A noble, maybe of some sort of dukedom or feudal system, but a noble nonetheless is an ally to the party. And they are generous, but they struggle with perhaps a gambling addiction. So, as a friend, they put the party on a mission that 100% is a big risk because they gamble, but it's for some sort of recovery. Maybe they're trying to recover their good name or their goods, even. I don't know. But you can set them on that quest, right? There's also the option when you are making that NPC feel real that you can kind of utilize the secrets aspect of it, right? Maybe the barkeep that has always been a friend and ally to the party is actually a secret NPC or a secret former NPC from a different campaign, right? Maybe they were the assassin that tried to stop them in the last campaign, and 20, 30 years later in this new campaign that you're running, they're now the friendly barkeep that remembers certain aspects of their life and keeps the rest kind of hidden just because they maybe are ashamed of it. But you can have it be where they have a secret. They have something that they carry with them that they don't want to tell the rest of the party. And actually, the former assassin turned barkeep is a great example as well. I highly recommend it. It's really fun when the players kind of put two and two together. Now, the most impactful NPCs, in my opinion, are the ones who connect to the player characters. These are the ones where you tie them together through their backstories, their goals, or maybe the actions of the players, right? Maybe the rogue's former business partner resurfaces and asks him or her or whoever for help with a heist. Maybe the druid in your party is friends with this one NPC that blames the party's ranger for a forest fire that they caused years ago. Or maybe the villain of this story, of the campaign, reveals that they've been funding the warlock's patron and twisting the character's power source into some sort of moral dilemma. Once you have all these things together, now you're ready to bring those NPCs to life. What my recommendation is, when you build these NPCs and when you have created a memorable NPC, when you've defined the NPC's role and built them up with goals and secrets and tie them to the players, now it's time for you to roleplay them. Now it's time for you to ready that NPC against or in response to the player actions. What you can do is take an index card or a piece of paper or whatever you take for notes and write down their voice, write down their accent, their mannerisms, whatever it is to differentiate that NPC. You can improvise, obviously, especially when players take unexpected actions, and let the NPC react naturally. And a big rule that I think everyone should follow is, if the party is not going to interact with the NPC for more than 20% of the time, you need to consider just being very basic and having their name, their race or species, their role or occupation, and then a quick mannerism and accent, right? Just something brief. Those are 4 lines of context that you need to know as the GM. If the players are going to spend more than 50% of their time, which means if you're playing 3 hours a week, they're going to be spending an hour and a half or more with this NPC, then you can really dive into those quirks, those goals, those secrets, the tying of the NPC to the player, right? That integration. You can use that and you can leverage that more. But I really want to emphasize that if the players are not going to spend any time with the NPC, then 100% stick to the very basics and go from there. If the players, again, are going to go one way when you've planned another way, you then, with a basic NPC, have not put in a lot of time for prep, and therefore you're not going to feel disappointed and frustrated at the end. Remember that NPCs are the heartbeat of your world. When you define their role and you add those unique traits, you're building depth to the world and you're connecting them to the players, which then connects the players to the world and then immerses them even more. You're going to create characters that feel so real and impactful that the players are going to remember that for years to come. So don't forget that, but don't forget to focus on roleplay. Let that NPC just come out naturally. Let the NPCs grow with the story. You might have some lines written and you might have that dialogue there, but let the NPC kind of adapt and grow alongside the players. I've noticed that when I've done that specifically for Lily, who she is the owner of the Laughing Mimic Inn, which is the staple tavern that I start all my players in. She has become such a natural part of me as a GM, where she is a natural caregiver. She's maternal, but she's not afraid to protect those that she loves. And that's grown with the story to the point where even new players and old players alike are excited to spend time with her in game. So after this episode, I highly recommend this. Try creating an NPC using the tips that we've discussed in this episode. And if you need a head start, check out the NPC creation toolkit on Patreon. For that template, it will be patreon.com/thebeardednerd. You can pick up that template and there's plenty of examples in it. So be sure to pick that up and it will help you out in the long term. And next time, we'll dive into crafting political intrigue in your campaign. If you've ever wanted to create a web of alliances, betrayals, secrets, if you ever wanted to create essentially a campaign that's like Game of Thrones, you won't want to miss it. So thank you so much for tuning in to the podcast today. Until our next episode, may your NPCs be unforgettable. May your adventures be filled with excitement. May your table be filled with laughter. And as always, y'all, keep gaming.